my gas. I know people who do. Why bother was his statement. When has it never not been bad? There are multiple negatives in that sentence. When has it never not been bad? Which means it's always been bad. But this is the only country in the world, ladies and gentlemen, the only country in the world that plays out in an adversarial relationship between energy producers and the public. This doesn't happen in Europe. This doesn't happen in Asia. This doesn't happen in the Middle East or South America. It doesn't happen hardly at all in Canada. Canada's oil sands are booming. One of my last acts as president of Shell was to call up Governor Ritter, who I met on several occasions, to say, Governor, with the outlook for the commercial development of the Piceance Basin and the oil shale out there, I have to tell you, we've decided that for the near and medium term, Shell's essentially going to abandon its efforts for commercial development of the Piceance Basin. We're going to shift our focus north and south, meaning South America and meaning Canada. We're not going to be developing in the Piceance, given the constraints. The governor thanked me. Not for the information, but for the decision. Because that meant that he didn't have to deal with the opposition to the development of the Piceance Basin. Because what was more at issue in the governor's mind were the opponents to development rather than the benefits from development. And clearly, the energy industry has this issue virtually everywhere in the country. So we've got to come to grips with that, ladies and gentlemen. Or we will face an unending battle over the crude oil price, which literally we cannot afford. You might say, well, we're a rich nation. And anyway, $4 gasoline, you know, it's not nice, but I can handle it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, fully 50% of the people in this country can't handle it. The median income in this country is $38,000 a year. Half the nation lives on less than $38,000 a year. They can't handle $4 gasoline. It saps their dispendable income for other things like food and medicine and housing and clothes and books for their children, for school. They can't do it. And they shouldn't have to. But here's the real rub. If you think the situation here is going to stay the same, I'm suggesting it won't. It will get much worse. Over the course of the next 5 years, if you go to the other side of the world, a few statistics on China's economic development are critically important to know and understand. This is public knowledge. This is public information. China will be building 5 million kilometers of highway between now and 2020. 5 million kilometers of new highway. What do you do with new highway? You don't just look at it. You drive on it. And what do you drive on it? Cars and trucks and buses, all of which will use liquid fuel. China's selling cars at a clip of 17 million new vehicles a year. And that's been going on now the last 4 or 5 years. Within the decade, they will have as many cars, prospectively, as we have in this country. We use in this country 20 million barrels a day. You get out of bed in the morning, for sure, we're going to use 20 million barrels a day. That's 10,000 gallons a second. China's on the same trajectory. By 2015, China will go from the 9 million barrels a day consumption today, it's actually about 9.6, to 15 million barrels a day by 2015. That's 6 million new barrels. India will go from 4 million barrels consumption to 7. That's 9 million new barrels. The rest of the developing world, at least another million barrels a day. Where are we going to get 10 million new barrels a day within 5 years? While the Gulf of Mexico is in decline. Yes, we'll get some from Eagle Ford, we'll get some from the Bakken Formation, we'll get some from Niobrara perhaps. But we're not going to replace the million that's lost in the Gulf of Mexico from those three plays, not in that time period. Nobody projects it. The international oil companies and the state-owned oil companies don't know where 10 million new barrels are coming from in the next 5 years because they don't have capital plans underway to produce that much new oil in 5 years. Which means we're headed for shortage over the next medium-term period, despite the best efforts of companies around the world. But there's one country that won't have shortages because they're anticipating what it will take to make sure they have the oil available to feed their economy. And I'm not referring to the United States of America. I'm referring to China. China, for the last 3 years, ladies and gentlemen, public information, not talked about by the newspapers, certainly not reported by the Washington Post or the New York Times. China has, over the last 3 years, loaned state-owned oil companies $120+ billion in hard cash. So that those state-owned oil companies, like Kazakhstan, like PDVSA in Venezuela, like Petrobras in Brazil, like the Nigerian National Oil Company, and a number of others, have the production capacity to provide China with their oil. China is directly contracting with those countries to buy oil before it goes into the global market trading pool. China will have all the oil it needs to feed its economic development and growth because they're guaranteeing the supply line by paying in advance and contracting for it. We're relying for 2/3 of our daily consumption of 20 million barrels on what's in the global trading pool at whatever price it's priced at in that trading pool. And I'm suggesting that China's thirst, China's appetite, is going to diminish what's available for global trading purposes. And what are we doing in this country? Suing the federal government over the permits that were granted in the deepwater Gulf of Mexico over the past 6 months. So what the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, Regulation, and Enforcement has done to grant new permits is now being challenged in the Ninth Circuit Court in Atlanta to prevent those permits from being acted upon by the companies that received those permits. And the debate is over whether or not a proper environmental impact statement study was done as regards those permits. So when we're standing in gas lines in the next couple of years, and we're paying well north of $5 a gallon because we have failed as an industry to convince the American public and the American political forces that are existing out there of the opportunity that we have to improve our economy through domestic production, we'll have plenty of time to think about how we got into this situation in the hours that were parked several blocks from the gas station waiting for our turn to get 5 gallons. We've been there, ladies and gentlemen, in the 1970s. It was not pleasant. People's temperaments, people's attitudes don't improve as a function of waiting time. And you can imagine when you're limited as to how much you can purchase, particularly if it's on the odd or the even day when you're not allowed to purchase. We're not going to be a country of happy campers. We don't have to go down this path. But I submit, absent a better public understanding and a political appreciation of the fact that we remain in a hydrocarbon age regardless of the aspirations and the ideologies that might one day make us less reliant on hydrocarbons because we prefer other sources of energy. We're not there yet.